Welcome to Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, the creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. For the past 9 years, I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I started raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott. For the past 9 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself, and I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned on this journey. As the Alternative Dog Moms, we're bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and sharing the tips, tricks, and resources we learn along the way. Now, let's get started.
Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
You know, I am so excited. I'm totally fangirling about our guest today.
Just a little bit. We've been so excited to have Dr. Pope on. The second we heard that we were going to have her on, we have text chains. I was mowing the lawn yesterday, listening to a YouTube video about new findings in cancer, but it's on the human side. And I had a list of questions that I lost. And so now I have an envelope that I found and just started scribbling questions from my memory. But yeah, I had a list of questions. I was so excited because I was working, and every time something came up, I'd be like, oh, here's another one. And I was going to save them someplace. And somehow during the day that didn't happen. And now they're gone. But we're good to go. So yes, we have Dr. Kendra Pope on with us today, and I'm so happy. Welcome.
You guys are awesome. That's so cute. I love that we can get so excited about something that's such, a emotional and challenging topic, because there's so many things within that we can do about it. So I love that you guys are excited. So thank you for having me. Yeah.
And I think both of us, have had cancer in our past, Erin, both personally and with dogs, me with 2 dogs, possibly 3. Rodrigo, I like to say he died of old age, but, at the end, they're pretty sure he had hemangiosarcoma. That reminds me of another question I had on my list.
So we always love starting off with a good origin story. So can you give us a little background? Did you always want to be a veterinarian, and how did you find yourself in this path?
I love getting the opportunity to tell this story because, life gets so crazy, doesn't it? And we just have all of these things that we're working on, all these things that we're doing. And sometimes we forget why we're on our purpose and why we're on our path. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to remind myself. I always knew I was going to be a veterinarian for sure. I was one of those people that from the time that I was asked, what are you going to be when you grow up? I knew it was going to be a veterinarian. But the calling to the oncology space came later, after I lost my father to colon cancer. He died when I was 22. And at that point, I already knew I wanted to go to vet school, but I didn't know, what kind of vet I wanted to be. And so after losing him, I knew that was the place where I could connect with my clients, and that I really needed to make an impact, not just for the 4-legged patients that I treat, but, the 2-legged patients that have cancer in the human side. Because anybody who knows animals, anybody who knows dogs, any animals, we know how powerful that human-animal bond is and what that can do, not just for their health, but for our health also. And so, my origin story is that I was never meant to be a human doctor. I was always meant to be an animal doctor. But the cancer space and piece came in from my personal experience, in hopes that we can make it a better world, not just for my patients, but for the human patients too.
Nice. Very nice. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that astounds me is I always loved the idea, as a kid, wanting to be a veterinarian. I know that I could not have handled either the education or just the day-to-day grind of being a veterinarian, because, for those of us who are not in the space, I think of people bringing in their new puppies and getting to know a dog over the years so that I'm part of the family too. I never really think about the sad part, which is, part of that. And when you step into oncology, there's a lot that you have taken on, because I'm sure you get attached to these animals as well. I saw that personally with Scout when he had lymphoma. When he went into remission, practically the entire clinic came out.
Yeah.
Or not when he went, but when he finished chemo treatment, they came out to say goodbye to him, and they all loved him so much. And this was during the pandemic when we weren't going inside of clinics. So they were taking the time to sit with him and stay with him. So they really built a strong bond. So when I had to break the news, both with them and with the other veterinarian, the holistic veterinarian we were working with, that he had passed away, I mean, everyone was so, I found myself like comforting other people because everyone became so bonded. So I just really appreciate what you do.
I appreciate that. That's sweet. And, although, yes, people can say like, how do you work with cancer patients all the time? Isn't that really depressing? I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can look at it, but I think one of the big benefits of it and why oncologists are drawn to the field is because those personal connections. Mm-hmm. You do make really strong personal connections with those people, and you get to be there for them in a time that's really challenging and like hold space for them and support them and help them, and really help be there with them through that last chapter often of the animal's life. And I think that that's like a really special gift that we can give to clients. So, we get something from it too, for sure.
So I guess the big question probably is that a lot of people want to know is why? Why are cancer rates so high in our dogs? I mean, I know that there's probably lots of things. There's diet, there's, breeding, there's environment, but in your experience, what is there a common denominator that you're seeing?
Yeah, so that's a really good point that I want to bring up because there is some new research that is really important, in my opinion, that's not being talked about. So for long periods of time, many decades, we've always assumed that cancer incidence and cancer rates are the same as they are in people. So we've really been looking at cancer as an epidemic since about the 70s. So it really hasn't been that long. It's only been about 50 years or so that really, as a nation, we've even been trying to do something about this. And over those last 50 years, when we've started to recognize animal cancers, we always assumed that they kind of happened at the same rate that they did in people. And the studies that we have that are quoted all the time that you probably have heard, 1 in 2 dogs over 10, 1 in 3 dogs in their lifetime, those studies are actually very, very old. They're actually from the 80s. If you trace them back to when they were published, it was in the 80s. So since then, we actually haven't done updated studies. And the reason is that cancer in animals is not a reportable disease. So what that means is that if I'm a veterinarian and I diagnose cancer, I don't have to report it to a bigger agency for them to keep track of it. So in 2021, there was a pet parent that got wind of this, had some money they want to invest into a project, and they started this kind of initiative to survey what the actual rates of cancer were in dogs. And what they found is that the incidence, the newly diagnosed cancer cases, which they expected to be the same as people in that year, were actually 5 times higher than they were in people that year.
Oh, wow.
And so is that actually the rate of cancer in dogs? And is that an actual finding that we just haven't been aware of because we aren't doing these long epidemiologic studies to kind of identify this? Or was that a one-off? I would wager to say that it's not a one-off. I would wager to say that it's true. I think most dog owners, if you talk to them, that's their experience. There's a huge incidence of cancer in animals. And so then to answer your question, what is going on? Yes, it's multifactorial. I think that we would like to be able to say it is one thing, right? Diet, vaccines, toxins, et cetera. We want to be able to link it to one thing because then we can work on that one thing. But the challenge with cancer lies in how we think about it. And how we think about it with this like myopic lens, this lens that it's this disease, like how we think about heart disease or liver disease or kidney disease. It's this disease of this thing. When in reality, what cancer is it's a systemic full body imbalance that's been developing for many, many years. And so because it involves all organ systems, your immune system, your gut, your cardiovascular system, your tissues, because it involves everything, there's going to be a lot of causes and triggers. Now, that might sound really frustrating because you're like, well, then what are we supposed to do? But the really hopeful part about all of this is that when we think about cancer, we're always told that cancer is genetic. There's all these mutations. There's all these things that change. And so we're told to think of cancer as a genetic disease. But where that gets confusing, and not only confuses pet parents, but confuses scientific professionals also, is that then all that implies is that I'm dealt a bad deck of cards. My dog was born with a bad deck of cards. Mm-hmm. And the reality of the situation is that only 5 to 10% of cancers are actually just bad luck, meaning their mom or their dad passed them down, and there's really not much that you can do about it. So what that tells us is that 90 to 95% of cancers are actually based on environmental causes. And so if we know these environmental factors, things like nutrition, immune system health, toxin burden, exposure to air pollution, cigarette smoke, their own innate detoxification mechanisms, we know that the status of all of those affect the ability of the cancer to develop or not develop. And so there actually is much more that we can do to control it and to minimize the risk than we think there is.
So my understanding is that you are one of only 4 board-certified veterinary integrative oncologists in the U.S. Why are there only 4 of you? Why don't more people want more tools in the toolbox?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what's really interesting is even over the last year, I've been contacted by, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 oncologists that are super curious. And so more and more getting curious because, I think if there is any playground for integrative and natural therapies, for the doctors to be the most open-minded about it, it is the cancer. Because as pet parents yourself, that if you are ever in that situation, you want all the tools. You don't want just some of the tools. You want every single tool that is available at your beck and call for this fight that you're fighting. And so I think that more are becoming curious. I think the biggest reason that there's only 4 of us that really devote our full practice to an integrative approach, because I do know oncologists that maybe are acupuncturists or maybe dabble in nutrition or maybe do a little bit of herbal therapy. But the reason that there's only 4 of us that really do true integrative practice is, as you can imagine, there's so much need for the conventional care and there's so much cancer that needs to be treated that it can be hard if you're working in a traditional practice to really find a way to do both, because an integrative approach takes a lot longer, requires a lot more diagnostics. You spend a lot more time with clients. It's higher touch. And so the very unfortunate reality is that the conventional paradigm of veterinary medicine doesn't allow for that. So unless you're in a practice that really supports that and allows that to happen and maybe has other oncologists supporting you, or, you can work with them, it can be really challenging. I don't know that the future of integrative oncology and veterinary medicine needs to be the boarded oncologists, because at the end of the day, what you want as a pet parent of an animal with cancer is you want a team. You want the doctor doing chemo if that's what they need, the doctor who does radiation if that's what they need, the surgeon if that's what they need, the integrative practitioner, which could be one or many people. And so I really like the idea of the veterinarian who that's their wheelhouse. That integrative approach is their wheelhouse so that they can focus in their zone of genius and let the medical oncologist focus in their zone of genius, and we collaborate and work together. Because multiple eyes on your pet is always going to be better than just, one set of them.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
When Scout had cancer, I work with both a traditional oncologist as well as a holistic veterinarian. Yep. So I drove him all around the city, yep. going to different vet appointments. But one of the things that I loved about, what you were talking about is the holistic veterinarian that I worked with, she practiced out of her home. So it was a very casual, relaxed environment. He was able to walk around and check everything out.
Yes.
And he really was able to relax, and he loved going there. And it's funny because, yeah, it would be nice to have a clinic that would be a dream, I think, for a lot of us, to have a clinic that just embraced everything.
Yeah.
Because it is hard to drive around, and there are people around this country. That saddens me, where they just don't have access.
Yep.
All the different people. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so I can stand outside and call for a holistic vet.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. So I've been very lucky.
Yeah. No, and I love that you bring that up, because when I was thinking about starting my practice and what I was thinking about, what my career looked like moving forward, I spent time visiting a lot of the human integrative oncology centers, and that's exactly what they do. So the integrative centers are completely separate from the conventional cancer clinic, because they've done studies that show when you walk into a building to receive chemotherapy, some people get nauseous before they even are getting their chemo, because they're associating what is about to happen in that space. And we know as pet owners that our pets can just walk into a veterinary practice and they can start trembling. And it's the same thing I see in my practice, where they know when they come there, it's healing time, it's calming time, it's feel good time, scary stuff doesn't happen. I know when I come here, I relax, and the things that I get make me feel better. And so the physiologic responses are different. And that's actually really important. So I've had ideas like, okay, maybe one door is for the regular stuff and this door is for the other one. But I think that they're even more sensitive to that than we are, because they're picking up on all those cues. So thank you for sharing, your experience of that happening too.
So when you're talking about the statistics of how many cancers are genetic, I think Kimberly alluded to the fact I'm actually a breast cancer survivor. And so the first thing that people always ask me is like, oh, do you have the BRCA gene? And I'm like, no. And then my joke, because you have to laugh sometimes, is, we're a heart attack family. We're not a cancer family.
Yeah.
Everybody else has any history. And so I found, I was looking up that it's the same with breast cancer, that only 5 to 10% is genetic and the rest environmental. And my very layperson understanding of the word epigenetics is that, there's various factors in the environment that can switch on or off our genes and our likelihood to get cancer. Am I explaining that right?
Yeah, no, that's a great job. So the saying to try to understand genetics and epigenetics is that genetics loads the gun, but epigenetics pulls the trigger. So you are born with certain genes, but those genes don't always have to turn on or turn off. So even if you and say your sister were born with BRCA gene for breast cancer, even though you both have it, one, it may turn on and become cancer, whereas the other one, it may never turn on and it may never become cancer. And so the factors that either turn on or off those genes are what are called epigenetics. And the thing that's important to remember about epigenetics and things that cause these epigenetic changes is that they're not like a light switch where once they're turned, they can never go back. They are dynamic. They can be turned on and off all the time. They can get stuck on for a while, then get stuck off for a while. They can switch on and off all the time. And so things that cause epigenetic changes are the things that we've alluded to already. Your body condition, what kind of food you consume, when you consume that food, your inflammation status, your immune system health, and then other factors that are specific to you that can change the way that you interact with your environment. So one example is if you know anybody who's really sensitive to certain chemicals or certain smells, there's some people that they just can't handle. Yeah. So see, and this is interesting about your history. Me too. I've always been like that. If it's synthetic perfumes, if it's pollution, diesel fuel in airplanes, I've always been really sensitive to smells. Whereas somebody else that might have the same genetics as you or similar genetics as you does not have those sensitivities. That's because there's certain changes about you that those changes are considered normal. They're called SNPs, NSPSs, SNPs, that make your genes interact differently with their environment. And so those interactions with our environment, even though your genetics may be the same, you could be more sensitive to toxins and to pollution and to chemicals than somebody else. The other big epigenetic change is something called methylation. And methylation has to do with detoxification. It's basically how good can you get rid of the junk that your body interacts with. And actually a very large portion of humans, some studies say up to 75 to 80% of people have methylation issues. And so I would anticipate that it's very similar for our companion animals because they're mammals like us. We know the reason that kitty cats can't detoxify certain medications is because they have methylation issues. And so if you can't detox appropriately, and we live in the modern world where we're assaulted with junk all the time, it's going to build up and build up and build up and cause a higher risk of cancer because those chemicals act as carcinogens, basically damaging the DNA and causing cancer.
So in my day job life, I work as a paralegal where we represent people who've been exposed to asbestos and cancer. And so, that is like one of the big things, right? That'll flip on the mesothelioma switch or whatever. Like, not everybody who is exposed to asbestos gets cancer, but pretty much everybody that has mesothelioma has that asbestos,
Yeah, exactly. It's a known carcinogen. And so we know that it's linked to cancers, and mesothelioma is one of them. And that's actually even true in dogs. We know that dogs exposed to asbestos have a higher rate of mesothelioma also.
I think it's fascinating because I've had 2 sets of litter mates, so 4 dogs, and 3 of them are now gone. But with Scout and Zoe, Scout got lymphoma in 2021 I think. And he passed in 2022. 2020. I think he was diagnosed in 2020 and he's passed in 2022, but it doesn't matter. His sister, Zoe, is still with me. She's 10 years old. Our Scout passed at 8. And what's astounding to me, or actually right before his 8th birthday, doesn't matter. But what's astounding to me is I spent the past couple of years waiting for Zoe to have swollen lymph nodes. And thinking, they're siblings. And so, but she's been fine. And with each dog that I've lost, I feel like we learned something.
Yes.
So one thing with Zoe, Scout was a very active dog. All of my dogs ate a fresh food diet. They were minimally vaccinated. So I kind of felt defeated and betrayed because I'm doing everything right.
Yes.
And, but I still had cancer dogs.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty of having that experience is that I kind of let myself off the hook. I'm no longer as stressed out because you just never know, I guess, when that trigger is going to be pulled.
Yeah.
And so instead, I've just focused on creating a very calming environment, lots of exercise, lots of just hanging out outside, exploring, focusing on gut health, focusing on keeping them, the triggers that cause anxiety and stuff, keeping that at bay, just to be able to give them a better life. And I want to think that I'm on the right track without holding on to that too tightly, because it's like that disappointment is just, it's a sucker punch. But when it comes to our dogs and raising dogs within the same household, and some dogs develop cancer, whereas other dogs don't, how do you explain it to dog owners so they aren't beating themselves up? Because that's the thing that I mostly see on social media is someone's dog develops cancer and they are, I have a friend that is dealing with this with heart disease, and he just kept saying, but I've been doing everything right. And even though logically we know that that makes no sense, when you're in the emotion, you just truly, you feel betrayed.
Of course. Yeah. It can be very frustrating. And it's a question that comes up a lot. I want to address what you said before, because I think it's important, about it not being so stressed about it and having that calm environment. There's actually a ton of research coming out on the human side about how linked emotions and how important it is to identify stress in human patients, and that factor has to be addressed in order for them to ultimately be cured, have long-term remissions. And so sometimes we can think about, especially in like our crazy day-to-day lives, manage your stress better, be less stressed, be more calm, and to kind of put it to the side, like, yeah, I'll do that when I need to. But those types of practices are actually just as important as all the other things that we're doing, the minimally vaccinating, the fresh food, the, toxin mitigation, the detoxification support, all of those things are just as important as the emotional component, because I also wonder how our emotional state feeds into their emotional state and changes their epigenetics, because they're so closely bound with us. There are scientific research studies that show their cortisol levels will sync with ours. There's also studies that show, as you guys probably know and have talked about, we're so similar genetically. Our microbiomes are almost identical. There's so many things that we share with them that component is just as important for health and longevity as all the rest of them are. And so I want to point that out too, that if people are minimizing the importance of emotions and stress, it does play as big of a factor as all the rest of them do. And some people argue more. Okay. To go back to the question about, what do we say to owners when they beat themselves up? I think it's the same thing that happens when a human who's a really proactive person about their health gets a cancer diagnosis. And it's not always the answer that we want to hear, but there's something for us to learn in that. Like, what is it that we missed? Because cancer doesn't grow in healthy soil. It just doesn't. If your body has all of the nutrients, it has all the healthy detoxification pathways, it's not building up toxins, it has the ability to get rid of them, it's resting, it's not stressed, it's not going to develop cancer. But there could be things there to tell the owner who's feeling so overwhelmed that we just don't have the capacity to test for. On the veterinary side, we have even less tests that for epigenetics and toxins and environmental exposures than they do on the human side. And on the human side, they still have tons of work to do. Because the thing about the human body, even though we like to think in the medical community that we know all the answers, is this super complex biological system that is so much smarter than we are. And we've done all of this research to make us think that we understand, and we really only know the tip of the iceberg about how our bodies actually work. And so there are a lot of things that we can be doing right that probably played a role for the cancer to either be less aggressive, to develop later in life, to maybe respond better to treatment, to maybe last longer in remission than they would have been if they weren't doing any of those things. So I like to remind owners that in my experience, even if they still get a cancer diagnosis, the patients that have come to me with more of a holistic lifestyle already tend to do better, because that soil is not as sick as it would be in a commercially fed, highly vaccinated, et cetera, type of pet.
One of the things I was super nerding out about getting the chance to ask you about is in my own cancer treatment, I worked with a naturopathic oncologist, and one of the things that I did was mistletoe injections. And I'm just so curious why we don't hear more about that for pets.
Yeah. That's, we use mistletoe all the time in my practice. So it's definitely available. And mistletoe is great for breast cancer. I have a lot of cat patients with breast cancer on mistletoe, and it works like so well for them. I have this ancient cat. She's like 20. She's the best. And she's been on mistletoe for like 3 years, and her breast tumor is just hanging out, not doing anything. So yeah, mistletoe, the plant we think about around the holidays, it's used in a very specific extracted form. And it's actually the oldest non-traditional cancer therapy in the world. It's over 100 years old. It originated in Europe in, I believe, Germany. And in Europe, it's the most widely prescribed medication alongside chemotherapy for cancer patients. Yeah. So it's completely mainstream. It's not considered alternative. It's widely used, generally accepted as a conventional treatment. In the United States, it's not FDA approved. So it's used in clinical trials and with some naturopathic doctors that are using it off-label for other things. We have access to it as veterinarians. We can't get the stuff from Europe and the United States, but we can get a compounded form. And we don't have as much information about the different types of mistletoe and which ones to use in animals. We're still learning about the kind of nuances and specific protocols for animals. But I can tell you that I believe it works just as well as it does in people. We do have some published studies. They tolerate it really well. It requires parents to give an injection, just like you had to give yourself an injection. Did it? Yeah, some people really don't like the needles, but it's something that you definitely can use, but you are going to have a hard time finding a practitioner who knows how to do it. There's not as many of them. That's something that we're working on with my education programs, is getting it in the hands of more veterinarians, because I think that it's something that can really much help. And I hope it helped you too.
Yeah. So with me, my husband had to give me injections like around my belly, and it would cause this big blow up, almost like a mosquito bite. And I'm somebody who can't stand a mosquito bite, and I will just go. So it was very uncomfortable. Does the same reaction happen in pets? But they say that's good, right? Because that's like your immune system being activated by.
Yeah, exactly. I tell owners that you should think about mistletoe like an immune therapy. So basically what it's doing is it's kind of waking up the immune system, and it's saying, hey guys, you have missed these cancer cells. You're not doing as good of a job as you should be of identifying them and getting them out of here. So it helps them to kind of wake them back up and to get them focused on the cancer cells again. And so in that immune stimulation, there can be desired side effects, injection site swelling, redness, some discomfort and pain. And there can be some really interesting reactions that happen around the tumor itself that we have to warn owners about, because they can affect the x-rays and ultrasounds that we do. So this is something that happens with all immunotherapy. The osteosarcoma vaccine, we know it does this too. Because that immune system is being woken up by the mistletoe, all of those immune cells are going to the site of the tumor. And so if you took an x-ray of the tumor before mistletoe and during mistletoe, it would actually look bigger. But if you took a biopsy, it's not because the tumor is getting bigger. It's because all those immune cells are going to the area of the tumor and they're trying to fight it and control it. So it's essentially kind of waking up that immune system and getting it back on track.
I think that's so fascinating.
It is.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So I was reading up on cancer, just the human side of it. And one of the things that I think it was Dr. Axe mentioned was vitamin D, like on the human side, a lot of vitamin D deficiency. I mean, I know that I've just been really into vitamin D recently, because I learned that African-American women, 82% of us are deficient in vitamin D.
Do you know your level? Did you check your level?
I do not know my levels.
Yeah.
And I found that, when they talk about the whole side effects, and the only reason why I got into this is because TikTok, someone created a supplement and they're promoting it on TikTok. And, and so in order to promote the supplement, they're going and getting all the science to support this supplement. Yep. I'm not going to buy that supplement because I just feel weirded out by buying supplements on TikTok. I use a mushroom supplement from real mushrooms that has vitamin D. Yeah. But anyway, I thought that was just really fascinating. So it's just like not only just African-American women, but women across the board can be deficient in vitamin D. And it has low energy, lack of sleep, gaining weight in the midsection, and all these other symptoms that older women attribute to menopause. Yeah. Where it's like, no, there's a deficiency going on here. And which also fascinates me because I won't say menopause is an American thing, but speaking to people from other cultures who have never experienced menopause because they just have a completely different, less processed foods in their diets and just a different lifestyle than the average American woman, that it's kind of easy to believe that, oh, well, it's the change. But how does that attribute to our dogs? Is because they can't absorb vitamin D when they're outside playing. So they're getting it through diet. And when it comes to the conventional diets, I always worry about the bioavailability of the nutrients in those diets. So it wouldn't surprise me if our dogs were deficient in several nutrients across the board, despite the claim of things being complete and balanced. But is there a correlation between vitamin D and cancer with dogs?
Oh my God, so many good nuggets there. I feel like I could talk to you for like 8 hours about all the things that you just said. And I want to just make the comment. I know, right? I want to just make the comment on menopause, because there is a group of natural practitioners and a lot of functional medicine practitioners that really think menopause is just adrenal fatigue. The reason that we're having trouble being able to switch from higher hormone levels to lower hormone levels is because we're so adrenally depleted that we don't have the ability to do it, because the same hormonal shifts happen to us when we go through puberty. Mm-hmm. And we have such an easier time doing that because our adrenals are not burnt out from the American lifestyle. And so I think your comment about other countries, it not being as prominent, is very true. And there's a lot of herbal practitioners that the way they treat menopause is not just about hormone replacement, it's about adrenal support, so that your body can just handle the transition, because it's more just about the exhaustion that we have. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to vitamin D is a very interesting, I'm going to say air quote, nutrient, because it's not actually a nutrient at all. It's a hormone. And there's actually receptors in every single tissue in our entire body for vitamin D. So for us to think that it's only important for like musculoskeletal development, which is what most people think it is actually very wrong, because our body, and even though we don't understand why every single tissue type in our body has a vitamin D receptor, every single tissue type in our body has a vitamin D receptor. So vitamin D plays a role in all of our cells in our body, including our immune system, our gut health, our cardiovascular health, all of those things. When we think about vitamin D and cancer, it was first recognized to have a correlation when in the 80s, actually, they appreciated that colon cancer patients living in the Northeast with the same diagnosis, same stage, same treatment, were dying sooner than patients living in the Southeast. And they were like, well, what's the difference? And they determined it was vitamin D level. So that's when we started to recognize that vitamin D and cancer have a relationship. And if you really look at, the full level of evidence that's out there about vitamin D and cancer, there's a couple of factors between them. We know that when inflammation in the body is going up, vitamin D is going down. We don't know who's doing it first. Is the vitamin D going down causing inflammation up, or is the inflammation up causing vitamin D to go down, or is it both? Because that's a possibility too. So we know it affects inflammation and has a relationship with inflammation. We also know that lower levels of vitamin D predispose animals and humans to cancer. Is that because of inflammation? Is that because of immune system status? The other thing about vitamin D that's really interesting to point out is that if we go back to historically how we used to get vitamin D and what our vitamin D levels used to be, they say back, I want to say in the early 1900s, not that long ago, the average vitamin D level for a human was like 150. Whereas now anywhere between like 30 to like 70 is considered normal. 30 is like subclinical rickets. Like you almost have clinical disease, and they consider it normal. And that's because from the early 1900s to now, there's been some major shifts in how we behave. One is we don't spend any time outside. And when we do spend time outside, we're lathered in sunscreen and we're covering our skin. The other thing is that when we consume animal products, we are not eating the vitamin D containing organs or hide. That's where the vitamin D is in the animals. We've stopped eating them, and all that we eat is the muscle. So for humans, those, along with the fact that a lot of other, evolutionary factors like pollution, et cetera, is driving D down. The other big thing about vitamin D that's a factor is it's absorbed by our small intestines. And so if we have a leaky gut and we have gastrointestinal disease, which is essentially every single American and every single animal that's on a processed diet or just living in a polluted environment, which is all of us, you're not absorbing vitamin D the way that you're supposed to. So those factors also play a role in our pets. That you're correct, Kimberly, they actually don't have the enzyme in their skin to convert UV light to vitamin D. So they have always, for all of time, gotten it from consuming organ meats and the hide of animals. Mm-hmm. And so moving them indoors, moving them away from a biologically appropriate diet, adding synthetic multivitamins to their dog food, giving them leaky gut, has also caused them to become vitamin D deficient. And that's a nutrient that I check in almost every single one of my patients. And it is rare that I find a patient that does not need vitamin D supplementation, even when they are on air quote, complete and balanced diets. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, my level was like 26 when I got diagnosed.
18. Yeah, real low.
Mm-hmm. So one thing you just said that really just sparked in my brain was talking about menopause and the adrenal support. So snoring next to me here is my newly adopted dog, Nessie, and from the shelter, and she's about 2 years old. And when we first brought her home, she was kind of, a maniac. And our vet saw her and wanted to put her on some adrenal support to support her body post-spay. She's come through the shelter system. So, of course, they spay and they vaccinate.
Yeah.
That. And it has made a huge difference having her on this adrenal support. And so that, when you're talking about menopause and needing that adrenal support, I'm like, that's what maybe one of the things we need to do more when, we're getting those dogs that have been spayed.
Yeah. The kind of class of supplements that is thought of most commonly when we think about supporting the adrenals are usually herbs that are in a category called adaptogens. And basically what they do is they help your body to adapt to stress. They make you handle stress better. So they're not actually producing hormones in your body or shutting down hormone production in your body. They're not like stopping cortisol production or anything like that. But what they're doing is they're allowing your body a greater capacity to handle stress. And that stress could be emotional stress, the type of stress that we have as humans. That stress could be physical stress. That stress could be the stress of a change in an environment. We experience all kinds of stressors. So those types of supplements that usually contain adaptogens can be really helpful for that.
So one of the reasons I was saying that I'm such a fangirl of yours is because I was fortunate enough to see you speak at the Healthy Dog Expo in Albany a couple years ago, where you gave what I feel like should be like this famous talk about the 12 ways to cut down cancer. I mean, I felt like this whole mic drop moment, like everybody was on their feet. Like it was really amazing. Is that talk available anywhere for people?
Yeah.
I feel like everybody should watch that.
Yeah, I can totally get it for you guys. I have it. I totally can. I asked Lori to have it because it was really powerful about that talk it was the first talk, as you remember, since the world shut down. Like that was the first time we were all together in person after the pandemic. And my two people were there that were like so special to me. One was my mom. It was the first time my mom had ever heard me speak. And my dog, my 18-year-old dog who passed away 4 months later.
Oh.
And so I was like very stressed. I was like, I don't even know if this talk's going to go well. I'm so overwhelmed because my mom and my dog and all these things. And I just like got up on stage and I was like, Kendra, like just deliver the message that's in your heart. Like, you know how to do this. You know what they need to hear. And there was such a wonderful response from you guys that it was like a very moving moment for me. So thank you for that feedback. But yeah, I have the recordings from Lori and I'd be happy to share it with you guys.
Because I feel like everybody, especially if they're dealing with this cancer diagnosis in their animals, like how, you just really laid it out and had all these graphs about how there's all these different things that we can do to, shut down the cancer. And, one of the things I remember in my treatment was like talking about the NK natural killer cells.
Yeah.
I was on like a maitake, I think I'm saying that right, mushroom.
Yeah. Yep.
And she would tell me to like go out in the woods and, because I guess the only other thing that can increase NK cells is like forest bathing.
Yeah.
And so she would tell, so my husband and I would like go for walks and,
That's amazing.
Like
What a great prescription. That's awesome. Who was your naturopathic oncologist?
Her name is Dr. Stephanie here in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And I'm blanking on her last name now because I always call her Dr. Stephanie.
Yeah. I wonder if I've crossed paths with her because I go to a lot of those human conferences because there's no conferences like that for veterinarians. So I always enjoy going to them because they're like, wait, you're a vet? You do this in animals? And I'm like, yeah. So I love that what's the last name? Stephanie
Porter.
That's awesome. I wonder if I've ever crossed paths with her. That's really cool. I love it. Yeah, forest bathing. Absolutely. Those NK cells, they're the cells of our immune system that have the best cancer cell killing capacity. And so, yeah, making those wake up, the mistletoe also wakes them up. Making them wake up and get back to work can definitely be helpful. So that's awesome. That's so cool.
Do you ever prescribe your animals like walks in the park or something?
I don't. And while you were saying that, I'm like, man, that would be so good, not just for them, but for their owners to get time with them, their owners to calm down. You know what I mean? Like, what an amazing prescription to recommend for pet parents and pets. So I feel like I'm going to start doing that from now on. So important.
So we're really to hear about your course. And one of the things that really got me excited when I was reading about it is you have this risk assessment questionnaire. Can you tell us more about that?
I would love to. So, as we've been talking about today, cancer is not just this, bad luck. There are factors that we know about and environmental changes that have to happen in order for cancer to occur. It doesn't grow in healthy soil. And so what can you do to evaluate that soil ahead of time to know if cancer is starting to develop? So a really astonishing factor that I came across in doing some research actually for my veterinarian course is the amount of time that it takes to develop cancer. And in people, we actually have evidence that it probably takes from as little as 5 years to as many as 25 years that a cancer is developing before there's a diagnosis. When you look at similar studies done in animals, it can be from about 2 years to even there's evidence that some can be 10 years in development before diagnosis. So the fact that there is that much time from when that first cancer cell is formed to when there's 1 billion cancer cells, which is the amount of cells we need for an X-ray or an ultrasound to see a tumor. We need 1 billion cells. That time from that 1 to that 1 billion can be 2 to 10 years in a dog. So what is happening in those 2 to 10 years that we can identify, or that may be a risk factor in the environment that we can do something about? And so what the risk assessment is it breaks up different categories, things like breed and predispositions, age, neuter status, vaccine schedules, toxin exposures, where you live, water pollution, air pollution, genetics that you may be aware of. It takes all of those factors and puts them into categories and then gives you a quiz to identify what is the number that you've received for that category. And then based on that number, you're going to get a total number out of 100. And then that's going to give us an objective kind of goal to work on. If we get a 70, then we wanted to get it down to a 60 or a 50 or a 40 so that you can really have a better idea of where to start. Because I think the other thing that can become really frustrating, and you kind of alluded to this, Kimberly, is that there's so much great information out there, but it can get so overwhelming. And there's so many things to do, and you're spending so much money on supplements and time, and you don't know which one's moving the needle the most. So it can be really helpful to be like, you know what? I thought I needed to spend more time in the diet, but it looks like I'm doing a great job in the diet. It looks like I need to spend more time in my stress management or in my detoxification protocols, and helps you to prioritize where to put those resources of time and money.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's, there is, and I don't know if you came across this kind of group of people at all, Erin, in your own personal diagnosis, but there is the naturopathic oncologists and the metabolic oncologists, this is how they approach human cancer prevention and cancer treatment too. And I imagine that a lot of these things sound familiar to you because you do them. the conventional oncology community, not because they're trying to be mean or to lie to you, it's because it's how we were taught. We're taught that there's, other than maybe not smoking cigarettes and not drinking too much alcohol, there's not much that you can do to prevent it. And frankly, that's just not the case at all.
Yeah. That's why I get, even from a personal standpoint, it was so frustrating because I had spent at least like the last 10 years before my diagnosis, like really trying to improve my health after not having been set up for success in the early years.
Yeah. And imagine how much better of a position you were then, to get that diagnosis. And, maybe before those 10 years, you already had that one cancer cell, and how were you able to change it and strengthen yourself so that when you got the diagnosis, you were better able to fight it? So, even though it can seem frustrating, I think we need to remember how complex of a disease cancer is and how long it's been developing. There's actually evidence that, because when I first learned this data, I was like, then how do you explain to me childhood cancer? Then how does a baby get cancer? Then how does a toddler get cancer? And there's evidence to show that these epigenetic changes, these changes that are turning on or off of these genes, can happen generations back. Even your mother or your grandmother can be causing changes to you that are affecting it. There's examples, like, for example, Jewish descents of Holocaust survivors, they're born with cortisol levels that are higher than the average Jewish population. There's other examples that some of these epigenetic changes can occur for even 8 generations back. So it's not, what we do and the things we control, even in this life, isn't even all of the story. What our grandparents and our great-grandparents did still affect us. Mm-hmm. So, it's this huge continuum of health that is much more complex than we would like it to be, and can be overwhelming. And that's why we need to kind of focus on one thing at a time. And maybe sometimes just, just like you're doing right now with your dog, Kimberly, like just relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the things is that, unfortunately, it's one of those where I love how broad and the fresh food community has grown. I mean, it was already a big community when I joined it, 11 years ago, but it is so astounding, just the hunger for information, the number of people who are taking the time to educate themselves. And it's beautiful to see. I mean, I used to be a big fish in a small pond as a blogger because I was the only one that was actually blogging about raw feeding. And today I'm just one of, thousands of voices around the world. And it's beautiful to see. I think, what lends to that, however, is once people started monetizing fresh food and but figure out ways to make money, and not speaking to, veterinarians and other professionals, but just as content creators, our main way is through affiliate marketing. So we're going to be promoting products. And it's, to me, a really fine line between promoting to earn an income and pay bills and promoting because you really believe in something, because it can be both. And what I see is so many supplements being promoted as able to fight cancer. And and it's one of those things where, yes, that's probably on the list of things that it can do is, prevent cancer. But what I found when I was going through my cancer experiences with my dogs is I created an entire protocol for my dog Scout. And so I shared that. And I've since deleted it because I was in a position, because I had pet insurance. I live in this area where I had the access to the products. I was able to get everything that I needed, work with amazing people. Because of my experience just as a blogger, I was able to connect with people all around the world who can help me and direct me. And the average person just doesn't have that. Yeah. And so writing content about this, people were thinking that they needed to buy, all of these Chinese herbs and all of these, there are so many things. And again, it's just one of those where, like, what was it? Not bee pollen. Was it bee pollen? No, it was crushed. Is it crushed almond shells?
Oh, yeah.
walnut shells or something.
The B17. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like all of these little things, and
Yeah.
we don't even know if that product actually addresses that specific cancer. But
Exactly.
we're buying it. We're buying everything and throwing it at our dogs, not even
Exactly.
knowing what's working, what's not working. And I didn't want to end this without addressing the fact that although social media is a fantastic place to go and gain support, there's an amazing hemangiosarcoma group. I don't remember the full name, but I just know in their header, it's blue. It's other stuff, but there's blue skies in the header. And when Sydney was diagnosed with hemangiosarcoma, just their files alone had so much amazing information that I was able to then go and talk to my veterinarian. And she was so impressed by it that she joined the group just so that she could get to know the a lot of the information, so that when she had her clients come in, she can answer some of those questions and direct them accordingly. But that being said, it's so very, very important not to leave your veterinarian out of these discussions, because social media is great for support, but there's so much misinformation. And when someone gives you, if someone is going to share with you, oh, your dog has lymphoma, here are all the supplements you should put your dogs on. You really got to ask yourself, where are they getting this information? How are they profiting off of sharing that information and getting you to buy those supplements? And whether or not your dog, at whatever stage of cancer they're in or whatever cancer they've been diagnosed with, would actually even benefit from those supplements.
Yeah, there's a couple really great points in all of that. So much good information. There's statistics on the human side that probably up to 80 to 90% of human cancer patients are using supplements. And we think probably it's similar in the veterinary side, and that only about 20 to 25% of human patients or pet parents disclose it to the treating oncologist. And some of it, the biggest reason they say that it's not disclosed is because they don't ask. But then the second reason is because they're fearful they're going to tell them to stop.
Yeah.
And so I think that you do have to have an open conversation with your veterinarian. And then I think the next most important thing that you do is, if you don't have a team that supports your goals, you find someone else. That's the most important thing that you can do as a pet parent, is establish the team of practitioners for your pet that are aligned with your goals. And so it can be very challenging. Like both of you have said, you might be in an area where that's not as realistic, but that is where your ability to do teleconsulting with a lot of these holistic practitioners can actually really serve you. And then maybe you do make a conscious decision to disclose it to that veterinarian, but not to the other veterinarian, because it is important that your goals are met in how you want to treat your pet's cancer. And, one of the most common things I do at a consultation with a new patient is we pare down supplements, because most of the time, the things that they're using are overlapping. And all that it's doing is causing financial toxicity to the owner. They're spending too much money. And probably the majority of them are not being absorbed because most of these patients don't have healthy guts. So oftentimes we can use fewer, more potent supplements that are really targeted, like you guys are talking about, exactly to that type of cancer, that patient. Because the other thing that is so important for us to remember in preventing and in treating cancer is that the histologic diagnosis, lymphoma, hemangio, osteo, you can have 10 patients with the same histologic diagnosis, breast cancer, whatever it is. But that cancer of each individual is individualized to that person or that pet. They are not all the same. And although our conventional treatments for them will be all exactly the same, the causes of those cancers and the holistic treatments for those cancers will be completely different and individualized for them. So a protocol for a type of cancer is going to be just that, just a kitchen sink. It's not going to be tailored or individualized. So until you're doing really thorough histories, you're doing individualized diagnostics, you're doing functional medicine testing, you're checking the immune system, the inflammation status, until you know all that information, you're just making up a protocol that may not even half of it be worthwhile. So it is really important to find those professionals that you can trust and work with so they can help you to dive deeper into the most effective, most individualized plan.
One thing I wanted to ask you real quick before we let you go, are you familiar with these tests like Oncotect or these like cancer prevention tests? And are you like, do you have good luck with them? Do you recommend them to people?
Yeah, so we had 3 until recently. One company lost funding. I'm hoping that they will eventually get funding again and come back, because having blood biopsy early cancer detection is beneficial. The Oncotect prevention test is a urine sample, and the other blood test is called Nu-Q. And we are still pretty behind the human space in early cancer detection, basically looking for cancer stem cells in circulation, but they are a start. And what I want pet parents to know about these tests is that they're just another data point. They're a data point the same as evaluating microbiome health, evaluating inflammation status, evaluating toxicity levels, evaluating environmental toxin exposures. They're just a data point to kind of collect and put into this bowl to say how many things are in this bowl and how heavy is it, or how few things are in this bowl and how light is it. Because none of these tests are definitive. They have false positives, false negatives. And like I mentioned, that continuum of 1 cell to a billion cells, they're never going to catch it below a certain threshold. So what we want to know is, are we heading towards a billion cells, or are we heading away from a billion cells? And these are just data points to help us try to make an educated guess about where we are. So if taken that into consideration and pet parents want to do them, I encourage it, but along with everything else that we're doing. Don't do the test, and if it comes up negative, be like, great, there's nothing I have to worry about. There's still all those other factors that we want to be considering.
That's great information. So what else should we know about your course before we let you go?
Oh my gosh. So I'm so excited about it. I cannot wait to get started and to share this information. I feel like this is something I've been asked for so long. What can I do to prevent cancer? And in putting the course material together, I just am really excited to share it, because the modern day pet parent is so empowered. They're so informed. They have so much information. The veterinarians, especially the closed-minded ones, they don't love it, right? Because they come in and they know all these things and they're like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I think it's exactly what needs to happen, especially with functional and integrative medicine, because the pet parents are the ones that are going to keep moving this forward and going to get the veterinarians interested, because they're going to be sick and tired of you guys asking them the same question over and over again about real food or about supplements or whatever, or vaccine titers. So this is where the movement needs to come from, is empowering our pet parents and letting them know that this isn't something that they have to be scared of, that this is something that they can take control of. So what else you need to know? It's only going to be available until June 2nd, and then it's not going to be available again until next year, 2025. And we would love to have you join, and it would be amazing. The course is 8 weeks of didactic training, 2 live calls with me so that we can answer your questions and go through cases. And it's going to be tons of fun.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure we have all the links for everybody in the show description, because we're really excited about it.
I know.
Awesome.
I'm really excited.
Awesome. Yay. Me too. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
Thank you so much for your time today. We are so incredibly grateful that you're here.
It was so awesome talking to you guys. Thank you.